Hello and welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve and it's my final team selection of the year. I've got a couple of yellow flags in the team and a bit of a puzzle in front of me as to whether I should bring in Salah this game week, and if so, who else alongside Bruyne I'll need to sacrifice in order to accommodate the Egyptian king one final time for the 23-24 season. Sorry I'm a little bit late with the video this week. I've had a recent loss in the family and wasn't up to making a video yesterday. However, I am here today to get out my penultimate video for the 23-24 season before heading into a much needed break. It's been a relatively long season. So before we jump into it, remember to give this a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, especially if you get any value out of the following content. Right, so we'll very quickly recap game week 37, in which I did play my bench boost. So if you're only here to hear about the discussion about my game week 38 moves, then please use the chapters below to jump through to the relevant section. So last week I was faced with the issue of replacing the injured Van Heck in my team, and I was finding it relatively tough to find any sort of decent alternative. Now, out of the doubling teams within my budget constraints, so I was looking forward last week to game week 38 in how I was going to bring Salah into my team if I wanted to do so, and so I was trying to leave the door open for that move this week with my move last week. And so out of all the doubling teams, I thought the Brighton defenders would probably end up coming away with between 1 and 3 points across the double. And top of my list of replacements was actually Veltman, but I didn't think he was actually worth the transfer and the additional fund outlay in order to bring him in. He unfortunately went on to score a very rare and somewhat jammy penalty box scramble from, I think it was from a corner. But pretty much all the other Brighton defenders came away with 3 points, conceding 3 of the 3 to 4 goals that I had predicted that they would likely concede. So, hey, a little bit annoying that Veltman scored, but I think, the odds weren't on Veltman scoring a goal last week. I was also still avoiding United entirely and had zero interest in buying any of their defenders, thinking that they would easily concede 4+ goals to Arsenal and Newcastle across the double. Now, as it turns out, they actually surprised me with a much more decent showing in both matches. Now, they still conceded 3 goals across the double, but as a team, they actually looked like a lot more of a cohesive unit. Now, there was a couple of changes that Ten Hag rolled out that I think is probably worth just tagging here in case anyone's looking for some super rare differentials for game week 38. And the early signs from Amad Diallo are looking pretty prosperous. He looked pretty dangerous coming in off the wing. I think he's a much better player than Anthony, Anthony is very one-dimensional, super easy to read, only ever cutting in onto his left foot and looking for a shot. It's all he really seems to have in the locker, but Ahmad was actually making dangerous runs into the box, lots of close control touches when in the penalty area, kind of tempting any defender to try and have a stab at him. He came away with a goal and I think an assist in that match, but he is on the list of potential replacement candidates in my team, but I'll go into that a little bit later in the video. And I've actually discussed another change earlier in the season in which I did say I didn't think McTominay was good enough to play in the centre of the park for United, but we could look at playing him as a solo striker. And I was actually very surprised to see Ten Hag playing him in front of Højlund up front, and quite surprised to see that happen before the season actually finished. Now, there wasn't actually anything spectacular from McTominay in this match. It was only one game up front for him, and it is quite a different role. A very different role to a CDM position, but definitely something to keep an eye on should it happen again. This is probably a little bit more interesting for next season if McTominay ends up staying at United. So I discounted Brighton and United and ended up having to bring in a single game week player and ended up bringing in Richards as an extremely cheap single game week player that had a relatively decent shot at a clean sheet and was rewarded with 2 points from him, which was just 1 point less than most of the Brighton and United defenders. And they were actually very close to keeping a clean sheet too. So apart from potentially going to Veltman, like, was much of a muchness, and having more funds available this game week, I think, is probably going to be put to better use than the 1 to 2 point swing I was looking at for that final spot on the bench boost. Last game week. Now, City, De Bruyne and Foden came away with 12 points and 11 points respectively, which is a decent enough return under normal circumstances. But Gvardiol's 27-point monster haul at 50% EO single-handedly crushed my hopes for the game week. Now, I was chatting with someone in the comment thread last week, I think it might have actually been you, Heather, about the risk of not going Gvardiol versus Walker and whether or not the sideways move from Walker to Gvardiol should have been made. And I basically said that in the comment that both Walker and Gvardiol had about equal shot at starting, as neither seemed to be getting rotated much, and both of them had a relatively decent shot at returning from attacking returns. It just really depended on who was playing in front of each of them on the right wing and left wing positions as to who was going to get forward more often. I did not suspect that it would be such a brutal swing in terms of points. I hope that little bit of advice didn't go too far astray for you there, I think, Heather. But yeah, that 27-point haul basically ruled out most of my chances of getting a green arrow this week. I came away with 123 points with my bench boost, which was 3 points off a green arrow, and it was mostly all Gvardiol that ended up doing the damage. Now, elsewhere in the team, Pedro Porro came away with 10 points, which was great to see, and actually quite surprising. Porro's only 55% owned, so his 10-pointer did actually help claw back quite a bit of that Gvardiol pain there. Cucurella got super unlucky to not come away with a lot more points in his 2 games, but did earn me 6 points at 11% EO, and so I was quite happy with that. Burn blanked, Sun blanked, Gordon came away with a decent enough 8-pointer, Isaac blanked, Gabriel came away with a clean sheet, and Vicario also blanked, and so most of the places around my squad, that was kind of filling out the rest of it, apart from João Pedro, who was the final player that I was umming and ahhing over for last week. So I got struck with very late news that João Pedro had an injury, and with the information that we were provided with, I thought he had a decent enough shot of playing the second match of the double, and I didn't see any other cheap double game week forwards available that were worth going for. And given I thought that he would play at least one fixture in the two, and the fact that he still had a decent enough shot at potentially playing both games, I didn't really see the point in wasting one of my final free transfer on switching João Pedro across to another single game week player, probably someone like Mateta from Crystal Palace, who indeed did score as well. But then I would be looking at the prospect of trying to buy Salah for a hit this week, and I didn't really fancy that. I thought I'd probably have a lot more points gained from this game week by bringing in Salah and having that extra free transfer this week in order to do so. So my bench boost, in summary, I got pretty unlucky to lose 2 double game week players for my bench boost pretty late in the piece. But unfortunately, them's the breaks. I was well aware of this type of risk when deciding to bench boost so late in the season. And so if you do take on that risk and get unfortunately lucky, you just kind of have to roll with it. So I ended up following through with a bench boost because Vicario still had a double and João Pedro had a very slim chance at playing twice, but I actually came away with 3 single game week players in Pedro, Richards and Gabriel, and Vicario being my only double game weeker. So that's how it all turned out. 123 points, a very small red arrow from 122k down to 126k, but we now look at game week 38 with 2 free transfers in the bank, 2 free transfers and 2.3 million in the bank with my downgrade of Van Heck last week. So my plan heading into game week 38, or my tentative plan, was to sell De Bruyne to bring Salah into my team, and I'm almost certain that will end up being my move for game week 38. Now, excuse me. The only other player that might have been worth considering was Saka. But considering he's currently flagged, and there was actually no information about him coming out of the press conferences, I can't really justify punting on him playing or being fit for the final game week, especially considering I do have a relatively easy route to Salah, who is fit, available, and has a very nice game, at least on paper, this weekend. So De Bruyne out as the only way I can actually bring Salah into my team. So in City's last fixture away to Spurs last week was actually a noticeably nervy display from the City lads. Now, this doesn't fill me with confidence in terms of a very high scoring game from City versus West Ham this weekend. I think City will win. I think City will probably win about, if I had to predict an exact score, probably 2-0 or 2-1, something like that. They might get to a 3-0. But I don't think Pep will actually go for the jugular in this match. He'll want maximum control over the game, and as soon as they reach 2-0, assuming that they do get to 2-0, I suspect they'll aim to play keep ball on the edge of the Hammers 18. So De Bruyne still has a decent shot at returning in this fixture, assuming that he is actually fit and available, as I still do see a relatively comfortable win for City under normal circumstances. And I think they, like I said, they will win 2-0, 3-0, maybe 2-1, 3-1, something like that. But the goals will most likely all be scored by Haaland, and I'm always looking to upside chase, which De Bruyne isn't an upside chase for this game week. I think Salah's ceiling is much higher in game week 38. And if I needed any more confirmation to follow through with the move, of course, De Bruyne is currently yellow flagged. Now, again, I do think De Bruyne will play this final fixture, but that is just a little bit more risk added on to how I see this game week being played out. And so I think there's just no need to hold on to De Bruyne when I can jump across to Salah. Now, in order to bring Salah in, I am currently 0.6 million short of going straight from De Bruyne to Salah. So I need to find 0.6 million in my squad. And so the question is, who is the best man to make way in order to acquire that final 0.6 million? Now, obviously the first person in my team that'll be standing out on screen is Gordon, because he is the other man who is yellow flagged in my team. And Eddie Howe wasn't at all helpful in the press conference about what is going on with Gordon. His comment was, when he was asked, "We will wait and see how he is today. I'm not 100% sure as I sit here right now exactly how he is. Certainly that tackle left a mark on him." Now, I think this was just Eddie Howe having a go at VAR, because that tackle was by far one of the clearest penalties I have seen. I have no idea how VAR has missed this, but I do see that this has sparked the scrap VAR conversation again. Very quickly, my thoughts on that. Just because humans are making errors using the technology available to them, I don't think that is a justification for scrapping the technology. Even the commentators who were watching the game needed to watch the replay about 3 times before they recognized that it wasn't the slide tackle that they should have been looking at, but it was instead the player behind Gordon who trod on his Achilles. Now, if the rules governing the referees in the VAR room are combined with a bit of common sense, I think VAR will eventually be good for the game. It has taken them way too long getting to a point where common sense should just rule. But I digress. I'm not here to kind of go on about VAR in any sort of lengthy discussion. I think it is a good tool for the game. I think it will make more correct calls over the long run. They just need to sort out how humans interact with the technology, and probably being a lot more transparent with what is going on with the crowd and the commentators, so that the commentators can let all of the viewers know what is going on a little bit more clearly. But anyway, so I've got no idea as to whether or not Gordon is actually going to play this weekend. Now, I suspect if Gordon is actually injured, he'll miss the entire game. So there is no real risk of a late cameo. I think he either starts and plays, or he misses out entirely and isn't even on the bench. So I do have a very nice safety net should I decide to roll the dice on Gordon's injury in João Pedro with penalties at home to a very woeful Manchester United defence. I think he is more than enough security on the bench should I want to hold on to Gordon and play him this weekend. Now the reason excuse me. Now, the reason that I am leaning towards holding Gordon is Brentford. Brentford have had the least XGC across the last 5 fixtures, and so that actually means that they have, on paper, looked like the best defence in the league across the last 5 matches. And I suspect that many models out there that are trying to predict points for FPL players are probably recommending getting rid of Newcastle assets given Brentford's very good XGC record. But Brentford have had one of the easiest runs across the last 5 fixtures. So if I just order this by XGC, this is the last 5 XGC. I still haven't had time to come in and fix the labels on this yet, but if we just have a quick look at the last 5 fixtures for Brentford, we can see they've played Bournemouth, Fulham, Everton, Luton, and Sheffield United. And so, given that run of fixtures and the fact that Brentford are a very well organised team in defence, it's no surprise to me that they have only been expected to concede 4 goals across the last 5 fixtures with that set of opponents that they have come up against. Now, Brentford do put up a low block very effectively, but Newcastle have been a top 4 attack for the entire season, and I rather rate their chances of scoring 2 or more goals against Brentford this weekend. So if we just order by expected goals for the entire season, Liverpool top, Man City second, Arsenal third, Newcastle coming in fourth, 75 goals expected, 1 goal behind Arsenal, 4 behind City, 4 further behind City and 5 further behind Liverpool. So Newcastle have been attacking very well. Isak, Gordon and Wilson, when he is on the pitch, look to be lapping up the chances. And so I really do think Gordon has a decent shot at returning this weekend. Now, my options for Gordon replacements. So if I do sell Gordon, the replacement options I'm looking at are at a maximum of 5.6 million or below, and it is pretty slim pickings. This rules out a punt on Elise at 5.7 million or Eze at 6 million, who I think could be worth a roll of the dice this weekend if anyone out there is looking for a bit of a differential punt. However, in the price bracket that I'm looking at, it would probably land on Garnacho to coming to the top of the list. But to be honest, if I think I was going to go with a United player for game week 38, I think I would actually go for Amad Diallo instead, who is actually down at like 4.4 million or something ludicrously low like that. Where is he? Ahmad. Yeah, 4.4 million. Came away with a 12-pointer against Newcastle. 1 goal, 1 assist from 81 minutes played. Played 69 minutes against Arsenal the week prior. And came away with some okay enough expected goal involvement. But he actually worked really, really well with Mainu and Dallo in behind him, and actually looks like he could be a bit of a diamond in the rough potentially from the one game that I have watched him play. I mean, definitely someone to keep an eye on. He would be an extreme differential if you are looking for a punt and are willing to go with United. However, if I did go down this route, I would be much more inclined to play Pedro over both Garnacho and Ahmad. Pedro comes with penalties and is playing that Manchester United defence. So I would really only be buying a bench option by downgrading Gordon. And I could just as easily play Gordon and allow Pedro to come in off the bench. So I think Gordon, if he does play, is a much stronger option than Garnacho and Ahmad and even João Pedro, to be fair as well. Now, somewhere else in my team that I could look to grab the funds from is someone like Isak up front. However, I do not like any of the forward options for any of the teams that I am not already tripled up on. Plus, Isak plays in the Newcastle team, who I've just discussed, is pretty good for odds on scoring 2 to 3 goals this weekend. So I'm not going to be selling Isak. I'm also not going to be selling Son against the worst defense in the league, who have conceded 100 and something goals this season, or it's a fair amount of goals. How many goals did they concede? 101 goals for Sheffield United, bottom of the league, but bottom by an extra 20 goals behind Luton. I mean, I'm not selling Son. That is just not happening. Pedro Porro, I'm also holding 55% ownership, decent differential, obviously has that attacking threat, which we saw last week, and again, Sheffield United. And I think also not selling Vicario either. Double up in the Spurs defense this weekend is looking very prosperous, especially considering I think Postecoglou did effectively plug the left back hole of Emerson Royale by moving the speedy Van de Ven out to left back, so shifting him from centre back out to left back, and bringing Dragusin into the centre back role. And I thought the Spurs defense as a whole unit looked much more secure with this set of personnel in the team. And so I think Spurs have a really, really decent shot at a clean sheet this weekend. So I'm not going to be selling any of my Spurs assets. So another option that I could look at doing in order to get the funds is to sell Petrovic down to Ortega, because I am selling De Bruyne. That is my third City slot, meaning I'm opening up one option for City. And I could cover the Gvardiol clean sheets in order by bringing in Ortega this game week at a ludicrously low 3.6 million price tag. I'm going to go slight segue into pricing here. FPL, I think, needs to introduce price floors per team by position in order to prevent too strong of a template forming from underpriced assets. Case in point, 3.6 million for Ortega is just a ludicrous price. If Edison gets injured for the season and Ortega is 3.6 million, everyone's just going to put Ortega into their team, have all this extra funds available, and it's going to start to cause a very strong template forming, meaning there's no real diversity in the teams out there and taking away a lot of fun from the game. Similarly, this would have avoided the Cole Palmer problem. Being priced at 5 million is also ludicrously low. If they had have set, say, a price floor for all City midfielders to something like, say, 7 million, so even Rodri is being priced at 7 million, this is still dirt cheap for a type of asset like Cole Palmer. He still would be in everyone's team at 7 million, because that is a ludicrously low price for someone that good of a player who ends up being sold to another Premier League club with penalties and actually ends up becoming the talisman for the team. But at least it's not as low as an insane price tag of 5 million for a City asset. So that's my thoughts on the pricing. They just need to introduce some price floors to avoid this problem of just bringing someone like Cole Palmer in. Great player, 5 million, comes into your team at like game week, 10 or whatever, and just sits there all season, meaning one spot is gone. The template just becomes that much stronger across the season. They can quite easily avoid that. So, however, if I do bring in Ortega for Petrovic, does that mean I end up playing Ortega over Vicario? I mean, probably not. I think I'd still end up playing Vicario in this situation. And so that is basically a bit of a dead transfer, which is strengthening up a bench spot that will almost certainly not be used unless Vicario somehow gets injured in the warm-up before the match. So I'm not really favouring this move either. Could also sell Dan Burn and downgrade him to a 3.9 million dud and actually weaken my bench for the final game week. putting me at a very slight risk of not having an okay shot at a clean sheet in my first defensive spot on the bench, should they be called on. But I don't think Cucurella, Gabriel, or Pedro Porro are going to miss out this weekend, and so that is a risk I am willing to take. There is also Lamptey, who is back and is no dud player at all, and he comes with some attacking threat. But he is playing in a severely weakened backline and some youngsters linking up well in the United squad. I can actually see Brighton conceding a couple of goals this weekend, which, fingers crossed, hopefully means some United football that I'll actually be looking forward to watching or actually enjoying this weekend, should they manage to start linking up the football a bit better on the pitch. The final other option is I could sell Foden to Havertz, which is something that I did discuss last week as an option I was considering if City had somehow secured the title by now. But given this isn't the case, do I really want to sell Phil Foden? I think he's still going to be capped at what I think is going to be about a 2-0 game, and it could even end up being an incredibly nervy 1-0 too, of course. But Foden does look to be an established first choice player in Pep's squad, and he's just playing so well that it's really tough to justify selling him for Havertz. The only thing Havertz has over Foden is that he is slightly closer to goal. He does have just as good of a fixture, if not slightly worse fixture, in the fact that I think West Ham's defence is a little bit weaker than Everton's. But Havertz doesn't have pens or free hit kicks or any other routes to goal. He's just simply playing more forward and more centrally. Everton haven't been giving up too many chances away all season either. And so I don't really see any upside chasing available by going from Foden to Havertz. So the way I think this is probably going to play out by come deadline time is that I'm going to hodl Foden. I'm going to hodl Gordon, as he is actually shaping up to be a bit of a differential this weekend, with a net negative transfers out of 165,000 managers are getting rid of Gordon. And I think I'm going to actually end up downgrading Dan Burn to slightly weaken my bench in order to facilitate Salah into my squad. So the whole team's going to look the same. Salah in De Bruyne's slot and Lamptey on the bench in the spot of Dan Burn, first bench spot. Very quickly on captaincy. This video is already getting a lot longer than I was hoping it to be. It seems like I've talked for a lot longer than perhaps I should have. So if you're still with me and it's captaincy, I mean, Haaland is just playing a worse defense, or that worse defense, apart from potentially Son. However, Spurs haven't been lethal or putting together too much in the way of attack. Once I bring Salah into my team, I think Salah is already a big enough differential. And if he does manage to outscore Haaland this weekend, he'll be so lowly owned and captained amongst the other managers out there in the FPL world that any sort of big haul that he gets will help me boost up the ranks regardless. So I don't see any reason to be going against a Haaland captaincy, and because I mean Haaland could quite easily score a hat-trick this weekend, and if I go against him and whoever I do go with doesn't match him with that hat-trick, it will devastate my rank in the final game week of the season. Would leave a little bit of a bad taste heading into the break. So in summary, there's no real final punt in my team, unless of course you consider bringing Salah into your squad a bit of a punt. I'm just going with who I think is the second best captain option, bringing him into the squad, and I'm going to be captaining Haaland, as I think he will probably come away with the most points this weekend. So I will do one final video for the season as a very quick wrap up of where I end up after the final game week scores come in. But that is it for this video. Now don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a comment to tell us what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time. Cheers.